You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. It is time now for the week that was, when we take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week. And we'll start with President Bola Tinubu, who has defended the economic reforms introduced by his administration, saying Nigeria avoided fiscal collapse after 3 years of difficult but necessary decisions. In a nationwide address, Tinubu acknowledged the hardship caused by the removal of fuel subsidy and foreign exchange reforms. But he says the measures have begun to stabilize the economy and restore investor confidence. The president says at the height of the subsidy regime, Nigeria was spending as much as 18.4 billion naira daily to sustain petrol subsidies. He admits the reform triggered a sharp rise in the cost of living, placing enormous pressure on families and businesses. But he assures citizens that their sacrifice has not been in vain. Tinubu says the economy is now more competitive. He cites gains in the capital market, with the all-share index rising from 53,000 in 2023 to 250,000 in 2026. He also highlights infrastructure development, including over 2,700 kilometers of highways under construction. All right, so the president is giving himself, as it were,
a pat on the back.
Well, I mean, it's a mark. It's like a score sheet, you know, after 3 years. But of course, this is what we get every May 29th. It used to be known as Democracy Day, but because Democracy Day was shifted to June 12th because of the significance of MK Abiola, all that May 29 now represents is the day of inauguration. And we have had two. You know, sometimes you feel like you've had this sort of, what the president is saying, over and over again. There's hardly any president who is looking at, if he has spent a year or two, or an important 3 years that the president has spent, that you know, he won't highlight his gains and then, you know, acknowledges some challenges. And for me, what I've seen in 3 years, the speech of the president that captures the 3 years, I would say that is the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we can't leave one for the other, because they all, you know, there are things that we can all, you know, feel. The good, he was careful to, of course, you know, start with the good, even though he first acknowledged that he's speaking to us, not just as the president, but also as a citizen, and that he recognizes the hardship that came with the reforms. He was heavy on the question of reforms, but he's saying that if you look at the troubles that we were in, and I'm sure that he probably was speaking more about the 8 years of his own predecessor, who happens to be, a party man. But he says that those were necessary steps to take, that the steps were bold and were courageous, and that if we hadn't done that, it would have been tough, and we would have been very close to fiscal collapse. I'm not sure what fiscal collapse meant. I remember IBB in those days would say that, you know, he defied all logic, you know, that Nigeria didn't collapse under him. But of course, he was told, as at that time, that the strength of the informal sector in Nigeria, which probably accounts for about 70% of, you know, day-to-day living, would be tough for that to allow the economy to collapse. But President Tinubu is saying that if I had not done that, it would have been very tough. He acknowledges that there are issues around security, but that he's doing all his best. And it's also, like we predicted last weekend, that he will offer more hope, patience, and patience to the people. So this is what he's saying. The jury is out as to how bad the bad part of it is and how gory, you know, the ugly part of it, particularly in the area of, you know, insecurity. More so that the madness that the country has been subjected to, particularly in some areas of the north, is now trickling down southwards. You can argue that Kwara is part of the north geographically, but of course it has a heavy, you know, amount of people who are not necessarily northern. Many of them Yorubas. We've seen what has happened in Oyo State, particularly in Ogbomoso. We've had fears around Ondo, around Ekiti, even around Ogun State. And everybody is worried that if we have to score ourselves, maybe the tough aspect of insecurity on the one hand and the very high cost of living that many people are struggling with will not allow many people to give an applause, because things indeed are very tough and dire.
Definitely. After the first cabinet retreat we saw in 2023, President Tinubu did release a message to all the ministries, departments and agencies. The SGF sent out a memo saying that these were the 8 major areas that they were going to focus on in this renewed hope agenda. I think that if we are marking the 3 years, 3/4 of the way through in the first term, that we should mark them based off of what we were promised by them when they started in office. The first thing they said was that they were going to reform the economy to deliver sustained inclusive growth. We are celebrating 3.89% GDP rate at Q1 of 2026, 3.4% on average growth in 2024. The presidency is also celebrating that our reserves have raised to $50 billion at Q1 of 2026. So that is growth. And they've said that the IMF and World Bank have given them a pat on the back for this growth, which is true. But is that growth inclusive? The answer has to be no. 140 million Nigerians are now living under the poverty line. That is an increase from 56% under Buhari to 63% in just 2 years of the Tinubu administration. We're told that 33 million Nigerians are at risk of acute food insecurity, according to the UN World Food Programme. And of course, we were promised that they would boost agriculture to achieve food security. But we're having millions under food insecurity, and that number seems to be trending upwards. That means we have more people who are hungry and poor than they were under Buhari, under the Tinubu regime. And the reforms that, because the NOA took out a 2-page ad on multiple newspapers yesterday. And in those reforms, they said we've had the largest mechanized drive in our agricultural sector, and we should give them credit for that. 2,000 tractors, 9,000 farm implements. But even in the things that they're celebrating, they're telling us that they expect to be able to cultivate 5,500 hectares. They expect to be able to reach 5,000 farming families. We're still in the expectation stages of what these reforms are going to do. 3 years on, I think that is poor, and that is a poor form. Even if we talk about security, they celebrate the fact that 8,000 terrorists and bandits have been neutralized. But we do not measure security by the amount of terrorists who are killed or who have surrendered. We measure insecurity by the amount of Nigerians who have been killed or kidnapped. And more Nigerians have been killed under President Tinubu than terrorists have been neutralized. According to Beacon Security Limited, in the last 3 years, it's around over 13,000 Nigerians have been killed due to insecurity. Over 10,000 or 11,000 have been kidnapped. We're hearing 11,000 were rescued for kidnappings. That means that over 11,000 were kidnapped in the first place. And so when we're looking at the wins, we must also look at the losses and look at moving away from, sit tight, the reforms are going to work, foreign governments are giving us a pat on the back, and look at the reality of the situation. If the reforms are not working, then there must be a shift in policy. They cannot hold tight. We're not saying or say that you made a mistake, but you must look at how the figures are trending right now, and they're not trending in the right direction. Our GDP per capita has collapsed. That means the average person is poorer now than they were before Tinubu took office.
Sadly so.
And so even if the GDP is growing, even if some of these policies are supposed to trend in the right directions, the actual figures are telling us something different. And yes, the retail investors are coming in. We've been removed from the financial grey list, and these are good things. But these macroeconomic finance wins are for the upper echelons of society. They're for retail investors, and they do not touch the lives of the average Nigerian.
So at the end of the day, I think what everything we've said just boils down to is, when do these macroeconomic reforms become household relief? When does it trickle down to the average person in their home? Yes, there's a lot that has been said on what is being done and what has been done, but how does this relate to every single individual in their home? And it's interesting because I believe that we have been asking this question for a very long time. So it begs the question, is there something that we are not seeing? Especially, are there opportunities that we are not capitalizing on? Because I don't want to believe that for the past 3 years, I wouldn't say the previous administration, I would say the previous presidency, we've asked the same consecutive questions every single time. So are there opportunities that even as Nigerians we're not taking advantage of? Are there opportunities that we are not tying into with regards to taking advantage of these pluses that have been, set by the president? I don't think so. I think as long as there still remains challenges within job creation, food security, security as a whole, as a matter of fact, it's very, very, very difficult for businesses to thrive in a space that is not even secure. Just over the weekend, we were in Ogun State and we were celebrating the Ojideoba Festival, and there were a lot of comments on social media. It was yesterday,
wasn't it?
It was yesterday, yes. That's what I said, over the weekend, like the weekend that is we are in now. It was just yesterday, and it was quite nice. But I think for the first time, one message that I really, really got from the festival was the fact that it wasn't just about the fanfare and the fashion and the festivities. It was about the fact that the people coming are looking for ways to give back to the communities through their own individual CSRs, and it's a whole explanation that they gave. But I think at this point in time, while the presidency says what they say, every single individual, every single Nigerian needs to start to look within to say, how can I make the life of the next person beside me better? As it pertains to salaries as well, as it pertains to business development, as it pertains to companies doing more CSR, because truly we have been asking these questions for the longest time. We're so dependent on these macroeconomic gains that are still in the works, and I'm very sure will continue to be in the works. But the reality is Nigerians are suffering. While we are waiting to see the ripple effect of these things, Nigerians are suffering. Videos of the people who were kidnapped are still trending on social media, and they're even begging that the federal government does not use force to release them because there will be consequences. It is terrible. So I think at the same time, while we look to the government to do what they need to do, we still need to look within ourselves to see how can we support a lot of the local businesses that are around us. There are a lot of organizations that are already doing this through SMEs development, and I think we can continue to do even a lot more of that. Now, moving on, the Independent National Electoral Commission has asked the Court of Appeal to reverse a federal high court judgment that nullified part of its guidelines for the 2027 elections. Inec also filed a motion for stay of execution of the judgment. Justice Mohammed Umar had recently nullified the Commission's revised timetable. The timetable directed political parties to submit their membership registers by the 10th of May as a condition for participating in the 2027 election. Now, the trial court held that Inec could not lawfully shorten the timeline already provided under the Section 29, subsection 1 of the Electoral Act 2026. In its 9 grounds of appeal, Inec argued that the trial court failed to pronounce on the jurisdictional issue of the suit by being hypothetic and academic. We had spoken about this just last weekend, and I think the key thing is this. This is already a season that is in motion, and we're trying to avoid litigation as much as possible. I think this would also confuse a lot of the work that has already been done. So it does not surprise me that this is happening at this time.
Yeah, go on this one.
Yeah, so I was going to say, we have the Justice Umar ruling from the 21st of May. We now have a second ruling from the Court of Justice James Omotosho from the 26th of May, both about INEC's ability to set timelines and deadlines. Now, Justice Omotosho's ruling is slightly different from Justice Umar's ruling, but I think where both courts agree, and that's very important, is that Justice Omotosho said that INEC does have the right, under the Electoral Act and under their guidelines to create these timelines and deadlines, but that it cannot use that authority to cut short the deadlines that are explicitly already fixed by the Electoral Act. And the areas in question here are sections 29(1) and section 31 of the Electoral Act. And very importantly, section 29(1) had actually changed it from 180 days, which is what we had in the previous Electoral Act, to 120 days, which is what it now says. Now, that had already given them, the parties, more time, and that's what was under has been signed under this Tinubu administration and has just recently been signed. So this INEC deciding to go against a statute of law is something we spoke about last week. I cannot understand it, It's not, especially something that took such a long process to get to. It took a lot of effort for both chambers of National Assembly to agree and for the executive to sign. There was so much that went into this, including INEC's own input into the Electoral Act. So deciding to change it is a very odd decision indeed, and has created some type of chaos in the environment. But what both these cases have allowed to do is that it has given more credence to the fact that now we're going to have some game playing, some horse trading, and some movement from politicians who may have lost primaries in the ruling party or another party and want to switch to another party. INEC is challenging the ruling of the Justice Umar's decision on 9 grounds. And it says that it's you know that they're mistaken, it's a misapplication or is a that the judge did not take into consideration the true meaning of Section 29(1) and Sections 82 and 84 of the Electoral Act. I think some people are going to be questioning why the Justice Omotosho ruling came in after the Justice Umar ruling and after the appeal to the Court of Appeal, because it does look like forum shopping. But one, of course, was by the SDP, the other by the YPP, even though they did disown that case. And another issue here is going to be how prudent and how fast is the Court of Appeal going to act before their summer break. Because elections are coming up and we definitely need this to be sorted out and to be treated expediently. So I think Nigerians are waiting with bated breath to see what the Court of Appeal will do.
Absolutely. I mean, it should be expected that the Inec will go to court. Inec is headed by a senior lawyer, a senior advocate of Nigeria,
yes.
And an academic, So it's expected that at least he will want to challenge what the court by Justice Umar is saying. When you say that, a lot of people will be slightly worried about why another judgment is coming on the heels of that of Justice Umar, the judgment by Justice Omotosho. I think it was SDP that went to court for that.
Yes.
I think, the lawyers are beginning to speak out. I saw what Femi Falana SAN said about why this sort of a thing should not be encouraged. And I think that was an important point, that he made. If INEC knew that they were going to go to Court of Appeal, and that's totally within the INEC, I don't think that we should be, seeing another, case that is slightly at variance on the same subject matter.
On a court from corresponding jurisdiction.
Absolutely. So what should political
bizarre.
parties hold on to? What should citizens hold on to? Like you said, everything is racing towards the elections. Yes, many of the parties, all of them actually, the 22 of them, have met with the requirement of INEC as at May 10. That was, demanded of them that they needed to submit their party list. But of course, we're saying that even when they have done that, what is important is that what is the true position of law as enshrined in the Electoral Act and in the Constitution of the Federal Republic. Even when INEC claims that he has the authority to give guidelines, should the guidelines go against, what you have in your electoral law? Those are the things that we'll be waiting for, and I think that Court of Appeal will have a pronouncement on that. It's the sort of a case that will likely go to Supreme Court, isn't it?
Well, it depends on if somebody appeals the next judgment.
which I'm sure somebody will do. It might not be Youth Party, because Youth Party, what we're hearing from the Youth Party is that, this didn't originate from us, but of course it doesn't detract from the meat of the judgment. This is why I think you should take the next story.
Well, a federal high court in Abuja has dismissed a suit seeking to stop former President Goodluck Jonathan from contesting the 2027 presidential election. Justice Peter Lifu dismissed a suit filed by John Mary Gideobi seeking to bar former President Goodluck Jonathan from contesting from future elections, describing it as frivolous and abuse of court process. The court ruled that the plaintiff lacked legal standing and awarded 20 million naira in costs against him in favor of Jonathan and 1 million naira for the Attorney General. INEC received no award for not participating. Justice Lifu also relied on earlier rulings dismissing similar cases, noting that Jonathan had completed the tenure of late President Umar Yar'Adua and later served a full elected term. Now, this is not at all surprising. We've discussed this previously. It's definitely an abuse of court process, and I very much appreciate the 20 million naira fine. 20 million naira fine. Because we've discussed it. It was a matter of settled law. First of all, we cannot have a statute act retroactively. The statute that could have been used came into effect after President Goodluck Jonathan had left office. Second of all, this is a case that had been seen so many times that I had to double check which of the cases this was. And every single one of the cases which has taken President Goodluck Jonathan to court, trying to bar him from running, every single time at that first instance of sitting, they have lost the case. So I'm not entirely sure why someone thought that this was a good use of their time and their money yet again. But I think something that's interesting is some of the news we've seen coming out of the PDP yesterday, because there was a news alert that I was alleging that the minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, was trying to bar the Congress that was trying to announce or confirm Goodluck Jonathan as a presidential candidate for the PDP. Now, Goodluck Jonathan has not yet, to my knowledge, come out to say that he is going to be running for 2027. But I think the political ramifications of that is what I think a lot of people will be interested in the coming days.
Yeah, but why won't he speak against it if he's not interested? Because every time
I guess his silence is golden at this point in time.
Well,
Is it at this hour?
It can be very dangerous.
Truly, that's why I said at this point in time, it remains to be seen, because his silence is really, really, really quiet. He's very, very, he hasn't said anything about this, but I think with regards to this particular story, it remains a thing if it's settled that he is cleared legally to run. But now politically, what is that going to mean? Is he officially at any point in time going to come out to say, yes, this is what I'm officially declaring? And then what does that mean for our existing parties, the PDP factions, ADC and the likes? So I think a lot of people still, there was that protest that happened, so I think it was about 2 weeks ago, that was basically saying that he should come out and officially declare. I think I can just imagine him sitting down and seeing everything that is going on, and if at all he has no interest to run, what this will mean for every single person who's passionate about it.
With the movement to get him to run, it was in front of his office in Abuja, and he did come out and have conversations and discuss with them. But I don't think that people coming to meet him at his office was a surprise to him.
But do you feel like he inch, like, I am maybe kind of?
To be honest, I don't think it's my place to really speculate on whether or not he wants to run. It's definitely something that he said he's taking into consideration, and perhaps he's taking these wide consultations very seriously, because announcing to run for president is something that should be taken very seriously. But of course, he's also probably looking as the field is developing. We have Sheyi Makinde, Donald Duke, President Tinubu, Atiku Abubakar, Peter Obi. It's definitely a crowded field, and so that's probably some of the things he's taking into consideration and watching as the cards may fall before he puts his hand in.
Well, very quickly, I don't think that in this instance silence is golden, But of course, time is also not on his side, as you know, and the only party, through which he can contest, even if he decides to contest, it will be PDP, because that's where his membership is. PDP is split, is divided, which is why Wike, typical of him, is trying to go beyond his boundaries, telling owners of events venue, who to, at what point should owners of event centers, should go and be checking who has been stopped by court and who has not been stopped, by court. How is that to be?
When he did it for the ADC, some people were celebrating.
But I mean, we really shouldn't encourage, that sort of a thing.
Of course.
So Jonathan has a short time to go, but on the issue of the settled matter that he is able to run, I think that that's a defining moment, at least for him. He's probably the only person that will qualify because the law, is the law is in place. Any other president that may, or governor or something that will fall into that category, will have to will be stopped by the law. But I think that our law should have been a lot clearer, like the American law. I think it's 22nd Amendment that gives nobody beyond 10 years, whether you are taking over, from a president that either passed on or resigned. You cannot spend more than 10 years as a sitting president in America, except, of course, if Trump comes up with his abracadabra. But we move on. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar has won the presidential ticket of the African Democratic Congress. The returning officer declared Atiku the winner after collating results from 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. Atiku polled a total of 1.8 million votes. Former Minister Rotimi Amici came second with more than 504,000 votes. Businessman Mohammed Hayatuddin secured a little above 177,000 votes. But Amici and Hayatuddin rejected the process. Amici described the results as concocted and alleged massive voter disenfranchisement. Hayatuddin also accused party officials of rigging. but we do have a winner. And
but does he have the coalition?
Well, there is no coalition anymore.
There's no. It is ADC, and it is a faction of ADC, as you are aware. There's another faction that produce. You may say that they are not recognized. They are not.
Who's recognizing the faction?
Exactly.
This is the conversation we had around, if we recall, the Edo State elections. And I said, if I go and pitch a tent outside and say I'm the factional leader of the APC, and I bring 4 people and they buy hats and T-shirts putting APC on it, how seriously are we going to take me? I think at some point in time, if we talk about PDP, we can see the factions and we can understand the gravity of the individuals within those different factions. But when you now say there's a faction in the ADC, and on one side you have Amechi and Atiku and Hayatuddin, and the other side you have Dumebi Kashiku, I'm not entirely sure if it's a faction or just a disgruntled member of the party. But you were saying, Mr.
He will claim that they're a faction, and he was the candidate, not just an aspirant. Dumebi was a candidate in 2023 for the ADC.
Yes.
We know, of course, that a new set of owners, shall we say, off-takers, are in charge of the other or the main ADC, which has now produced former President Atiku Abubakar. If Atiku runs as we expect him to, I mean, he will have added to his feather of being the longest, Nigerian ever, possibly African, who has attempted to be president for so many.
I'm not sure African. We've
attempt in trying to run. Attempt in trying to run. I would love to be educated as to how many people will have been trying for 33 years since 1993 that Atiku Abubakar, has been on it. But what is interesting in all of this is that we may have something similar, like a repeat of what we had in 2023. If there is no wave at some point leading to the elections of 2027, if there is no convergence, because yes, you may have Sheyima Kede, have this, have that, but at the end of the day, you might have people that will come together and say that we think that this one person, maybe it will be the president, maybe it might be Atiku, maybe it might be Obi. If we do not have that, we will have a repeat of what we had in 2023.
Which is an incumbent win?
I mean, it will be pretty obvious to predict, what will happen, except, as I said, a wave occurs along the line.
I have to disagree a little bit, because I do think that one of the things that has changed from 2023 is the fact that we now have an array of Southerners, and it seems a single leading Northern candidate. And that might change the calculations for some people going in, because at the end of the day, any candidate that emerges as president is going to require that 25% in 2/3 of the states plus the FCT. And I think that 25% might be that deciding whether we're going to get a president in the first round, or if we're going to have a second round elections for the first time ever.
The same way we were thinking last in 2023.
But understand.
But let's see.
But I do agree with you in that Atiku has been gunning for this for 33 years. It's a very long time to run for full president.
I would love to know another African who has made such number of attempts.
We definitely do have. We definitely do have in East and South Africa.
Yeah, I'm sure we do.
Sorry, Kachi.
No, it's okay. Away from the Nigerian political space now, let's head into Kenya, where a dazzling array of beautiful... we're still in Nigeria, as a matter of fact. A dazzling array of beautifully adorned men, women, youths, and cultural enthusiasts thronged the ancient town of Ijebu-Ode on Friday for the 2026 Ojidioba Festival. Now, this event transformed the city into a vibrant panorama of color, glamour, and heritage tradition as well. The annual celebration featured spectacular horse riding processions, richly embroidered attires, rhythmic traditional music, and elegant displays by age grade groups. Of course, yesterday was Ojidioba, and I have to say this was my first time attending Ojidioba and my first time in Ijebu-Ode as well. Oh. Yes, it was a very smooth drive, I would say. I have to give it to the governor. I'm not going to lie. The ride was not as bad as, traveling to some states in Nigeria has been for me. So the road was actually pretty good. But away from that...
You're talking about the federal road that got you into Ogun State?
Well, even within...
The reason why that road was because it was so bad that it
but even within...
previous Ojidioba, and there was a whole lot of
But
noise.
If you remember, there was a report.
Also give kudos to the federal government for fixing the road that took you there.
Well, congratulations.
Without taking away from,
without taking away from the governor,
States.
because I do remember
Just
that
a
last year, Adefemi Akinsanya had done a story, and she had also spoken about some developments that had happened within the state as well, which would make this year a lot easier.
Yeah.
So I'm just giving kudos to the governor for that one, and of course to Dapo Abiodun, and for Steve, the federal government, because you wanted that.
Meiji celebrated his birthday on the day of the election of Ojude-Oba, because Ijebu-Ode is one of my hometowns. So I'm listening to your praise. Please continue.
Oh, you're enjoying it. There's a lot, but just wait for it. It's coming. So yes, the festival started really early, but I think that what was really key for me was just you see, when we see Ojude-Oba, for instance, this is an Arise photographer that had gone to the festival. Arise had a very, very large team as usual. And when we see the pictures from the event, we see the glamour, we see the style, we see the fashion, we see the grandeur of the people. But a lot of times what we miss out on is the actual essence of the festival. I thought it was really beautiful to see how, number one, a lot of the people attending the festival are not just within people who live within the area. So people travel far and wide to actually attend Ojude-Oba. Now, I had said this, that there are so many festivals. I think Nigeria has some of the most beautiful festivals in terms of the concept and the reason. But with the difference with this is the seriousness with which indigenes, whether they are from Ijebu or married into Ijebu, either way, take the festival. They take it really serious. They take the time to get dressed. And it's also understanding of the fact that, yes, it gets uncomfortable, because I think after the parade, a lot of the older people within the age grades begin to leave for their own individual parties. But at least they show up. They sit down, and they participate in all the festivities. And of course, there's the CSR angle to it, where they, like I said, they do give back to the Ijebu communities. Now, one of the conversations that I would say a lot of people did not want to speak on, but was a huge elephant in the room, was the fact that there was no Awujale present. It was similar to what we had last year with the elder who was, I think that he from the Kuku family, who was seating in place of the Awujale because he wasn't well last year. But this year was the same thing, and there was this portrait of the Awujale, Obaditana, on a seat, just to basically see this is where he would have been. So this year was really about just celebrating his legacy, and a lot of people had glowing things to say. But with regards to why there hasn't been a selection yet, was one thing that a lot of people did not want to speak on, because it has a lot of political undertones that they did not want to be involved in. So they just focused on the celebration, on the festivities, and on the community's defiance to say, with or without, they're still going to celebrate the legacy, and they're still going to make sure that they give back to the community.
Was Farouk there, by the way? Is he only that noticing that he didn't quite trend like the two previous editions?
I think
my darling Uncle Farouk, yes, he was there. I think he was there, but he was there for FCMB flag. But the Yoruba family were there and very, very well represented. And he spoke about the Kukus. My dear friend Forare Kuku just was in his investiture as the Asiwaju Ogun of the Balogun Kuku dynasty. Also happened during this Ojude-Oba festival. For me, as somebody who's Ijebu and Bini, I have to say that one thing that I respect about Ijebu people and Yoruba people as a whole, and something that we see from this, that Ojude-Oba festival is started for the Muslim members of the Ijebu. And when we see how we respect, it's part of the Salah celebration, but we see that we respect each other, our religions, our cultures, is that you have Catholic Ijebus, you have Muslim Ijebus, and you have, Muslim Yorubas and Christian Yorubas, and we come together and we still celebrate each other. And I think that is what this represents in terms of the true Nigerian spirit, is coming together and, forming bridges across cultures and religions. But let's take our next story very quickly. A Kenyan High Court has ordered the temporary suspension of plans for the United States to set up an Ebola quarantine facility in the country. High Court Judge Patricia Nyondi said in her orders late on Thursday that Kenya was also not allowed to admit anyone exposed to or infected by Ebola under the planned agreement with the U.S. until a case challenging the deal was heard and determined. On Thursday, the White House said that the U.S. was setting up a facility in Kenya to quarantine U.S. citizens who had been exposed to Ebola and would not bring them home if they developed symptoms, but instead send them to a third country.
All right, we'll proceed. Pope Leo XIV has called for the disarming of artificial intelligence in his long-awaited manifesto on the rapidly developing technology. and warned of new forms of slavery behind its rise. The just war theory espoused recently by the Trump administration was outdated, Liu wrote in his first encyclical, which he presented in person at the Vatican alongside AI experts, including the co-founder of US giant Anthropic. The first US Pope who has clashed with the White House over the Iran war and its use of religion to justify conflict sounded the alarm over AI-directed weaponry, saying it was not permissible to entrust lethal decisions to tech. American giant Anthropic, which has taken its position as an ethical AI company, is embroiled in a legal battle with the US military after opposing the use of its technology for lethal autonomous warfare or mass surveillance. Two important stories there, ladies. Pope, his first ever, what do they call that thing within the Catholic faith? His first ever major, written position on what is happening. It's on AI, and he's insisting, like he has said. I think from November last year, he's been, precise as to the reservations he has, about AI. And of course, the other story is the courageous acts from, our Kenyan brothers and sisters who are saying that, we do not support that Americans should come and open a quarantine facility, for Americans in our country. But of course, we know that this has to do with about $13.5 million deal that the White House is, dangling in front of the Kenyan government to say that in the event that we have Americans who are infected by Ebola or something like that, let's use one of your air bases, to quarantine them, even though there's no one single American yet, that has contracted the disease. And the Kenyans, and there are two, cases, by the way. One is the one that is restricting the American government now. The other one will still be on. And they're saying that, no, not on our land, not on our soil.
I wonder why they didn't go to Equatorial Guinea. I guess that would be too far. Because they're already using a hotel in Equatorial Guinea as a makeshift prison. So I'm not entirely... I guess they didn't want to go all the way to West Africa. For me, with stories like this, we saw what happened with the Hunter virus, and we're seeing how they're treating Ebola. I think when an illness originates in Africa, there's a way that they treat it that's just that different, because the Hunter virus, particularly when it came to their own citizens, they didn't treat them with the same type of, stay away from us or go to a different country or let's export our problems and our issues elsewhere. I'm happy for the Kenyan judges that stood up for the Kenyan people and for the Kenyan people who rose their voice against this. And Ruto right now is just not very popular.
Looking at $13.5 million.
I love how the public is responding to this as well, to be very, very honest. I think this also poses a risk to the people, and I think that their stance on this is going to say a lot, especially as it pertains, because we've seen a lot of requests like this coming through. So I think their stance on this is very, very important in seeing how many more of this sort of requests that we get.